An indie horror film about traditions and curses? Oh my. Hey everyone, this is David Stark from Watcher Pass. I'm here to talk to you about The Accursed, which is coming to theaters and on demand on November 12th, 2021. It's a new indie horror film directed by, I'm going to get all these names wrong because I cannot pronounce them. It's directed by Elizabeta Vidovic and Kathryn Michelle, and it stars Yancy Butler, Izabela Vidovic, Goran Visnjic, I cannot pronounce any of these names, and a lot of other people. Here's my hot take. This film was better than I expected it to be. I went in thinking it would be kind of your standard indie throwaway horror film, and it actually has a lot to like. I still think it's probably a rental in my scale of things. It's probably a rental. There are some issues with it, but overall, it's a lot better than I expected it to be, and it has enough interesting traditions and interesting characters to kind of keep your interest for the movie. So I'm going to do a really quick review on this one. I'm going to quickly go through the things I liked and things I didn't like. There will probably be some spoilers, not a ton, but there will be some spoilers. So if you don't want to know anything about the film, it's going to be out in theaters and digital on November 12th, 2021. You can check it out and then watch this review after. Let me know what you thought. First thing I really loved about this film is the cast. I don't know. I hadn't actually seen a lot of these actors before, but they all did a pretty good job. I liked how they all felt like the film takes place at essentially a wedding and then the aftermath of the wedding. There's a lot of family drama, and the cast all does a pretty good job of highlighting that family drama and also having a bunch of different layered characters in there. I think I really liked Peter, who was the fiance. He was a lovely he seemed like a very lovely person. And so because it's based on kind of a family, you had all these characters that kind of meld well together, and they all were pretty interesting and had some layers. I liked kind of peeling those back and seeing where all these characters had come from. And so overall, I really liked the cast. I was a lot better than I was expecting it to be. The second thing I loved is kind of the traditions and the lore in this film. This film feels like it's based in some sort of underlying traditions. I'm not sure what region. I think maybe Romania, but I am not certain. So don't quote me on that. But it feels like a lot of what is in this, it could just have been made for the film, but it does feel like it has a pretty interesting backstory. Some of the rituals that are done, some of the curses that are made, and the counter curses that happen, and some of the wards that are constructed all feel like they're steeped in some sort of tradition. And I also liked, there was one scene when one of the characters made like an herb remedy, and she was reciting the reasons for each thing to be thrown in. And it wasn't like your kind of your typical witchcraft was like eye of new blah blah blah. It was each thing had a specific purpose for this salve, and I thought that was interesting. It was a little more in depth than I expected to be. And most of this film had more depth and backstory than I expected going into the movie. And the last thing I really liked is the plot twists. There are some interesting plot twists. They're not super surprising, but they at least keep it interesting and at least move the story along and let kind of keep you on your toes as you're watching this. Things I did not love. The first is some of the effects were very CG, and it's an indie film, so it happens. But there were some effects that were clearly CG. There's this plant that kind of moves on its own and grapples people, and that was very clearly CG. And there was another scene where I think she blew like rose petals and they floated up and fluttered away, and that was clearly CG. I mean, and there's a decent amount of CG in this that is very noticeable. And it's an indie film. I understand that you're gonna have a little bit of CG just because sometimes the budget isn't there, but it did look out of place in this film that otherwise has pretty decent overall effects, and not a lot of effects actually. The second thing I didn't love is, like I said, the film feels like it's steeped in some sort of traditions, but some of the explanations for some of the things that happened felt lacking. And there was one instance where they went back and forth on like what would happen with a curse, and it just felt like they were throwing out aspects randomly, like, oh, blah 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 blah, blah blah blah. And then I had no basis for this, so it just felt like they were just kind of escalating or throwing out random things. Look, I get maybe there is more backstory in this. Maybe I just didn't catch it. But for a film that had what seemed to be a pretty rich backstory, instances like that just kind of, I don't know, they stood out to me. And the third thing I didn't love is it felt like there was a lot of buildup in this movie, but not a ton of payoff. And that's mostly because the film builds a lot, and then eventually you do start. And here's where you're gonna have some spoilers, but I'll try to keep it mostly generic. Eventually, you do have some sightings of something, some sort of entity, some sort of being. But it feels like a lot of the characters see the entity multiple times before anything actually bad happens. It's like they'll be looking and the entity will appear and it'll like get close and do something menacing, and then all of a sudden they'll like turn their head or be distracted and it's gone. And I felt like that happened a lot, and I expected at some point for something to happen, like maybe the entity would actually hurt someone. But and that didn't really happen until the very end. And so it did feel like there was all these instances where it's like, oh, close call, close call, close call, close call. And at some point, you expect those close calls to go away, and it kind of happened at the very end. And the last thing I didn't love, but this is not a big thing, is some of the descriptions of the lore were in books, and I don't know. I just kind of like it when there's some sort of voiceover for that when something is in a book, because sometimes it was kind of a fleeting image of it, or if your internet's not great, then the stream could be tough to read. So if you don't have that that voiceover, it can make it tough to follow some of the backstory pieces, and you don't want to miss any of those. So you don't so then you have to pause and go back and reread them. So that was just another minor complaint. But overall, like I said, this film is a lot better than I thought it would be. I really liked the characters. I liked the just kind of setting and overall traditions that the film had. And so I think overall it's a rental. That's the film is The Accursed. You can check it out in theaters and digital on November 12th, 2021 from Gravitas Ventures. And thanks so much for watching. If you like this review, please like and subscribe to this channel. It helps me out a lot. Make sure all my new content goes straight to you. Thank you.